welcome back to the Mile 17 podcast. My name is Colton. I am so honored today to have Nurse Julie, Hospice Nurse Julie, with us today. I honestly, whenever I think of guests to have on this podcast, I'm always just like, who are people that inspire me, and like, what are things that are people doing right now that like are catching my attention? And like, I saw you on another podcast, and instantly I was just like, oh my god, like I have to talk to her. And so first off, thank you, Julie, for being here.
Aw,
So why don't you just introduce yourself to the Mile 17 podcast, kind of tell us, where you're from, how you've gotten to where you are today to be a hospice nurse.
that's right. So my name is Julie McFadden. I'm known as Hospice Nurse Julie online. I've been a nurse for around 16 years. Most of that time, well, no, I'd say half and half now. So half of the time was in the ICU, and now half of the time has been as a hospice and palliative care nurse. I took to social media about 3 years ago, just talking about death and dying and trying to educate the general public about it. And I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania. I'm a country girl at heart.
Okay.
But I live in Los Angeles now. I've lived here for like 13 years.
Wow,
And
that's a big adjustment. Small
I
town,
know,
small
yeah.
town to LA. Did you go from Pennsylvania to LA, or did you kind of have like different places in between?
No, I had different places.
Okay.
I spent some time in Baltimore, Maryland. That was my
Oh,
first
nice.
my first nursing job was at Johns Hopkins.
Oh, okay.
And so I
Awesome.
moved to Baltimore, Maryland, and was there for 5 or 6 years, and then moved to California.
Nice. How do you like it out in LA? I mean, if you've been there that long, I'm assuming you do.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. I feel like I've been here long enough now that I'm getting a little tired of it, a little tired of like people and traffic and just
Yeah.
like the
I get
hustle
that.
of it all. But when I
I get that.
first moved here, it was truly life-changing because I live on the west side. So the west side to me is like the best side because
Yeah.
it's 75 degrees and sunny like all the time, and it's not too hot, it's not too cold. So daily sunshine for me was like a
Amazing.
true game changer. Like it
Seriously.
really did change my life.
Yeah, I
So
feel that.
the first few years, I was like, I am sold. I love
Like I'm here
LA.
forever. Yeah.
Yeah. And now it's like 13 years in, I'm kind of like, it's just so you like
Yeah.
can't really leave your neighborhood. Like you can't like
It's
just 'cause it's
traffic and
yeah.
yeah.
Where do you live?
I'm in Boston, which
Oh,
I mean, kind of like the flip side of what you're saying. So I'm from Arizona. So now I live in Boston where, I mean, summers are amazing and the winters like aren't as snowy, probably because of, the earth is so hot now,
global
but
warming.
it's, yeah, global warming.
Global warming is
Um,
real. We're both on the same page, right?
Yes, but like it's like I now don't I'd never realized how much I needed the sun because it's so gray here. It may not be like a snowy or whatever, but it's still by 4 p.m. it's dark. And the seasonal
I know.
depression is real in the winter out here. And it's something that I did not realize was a thing.
It is real. Erie, Pennsylvania, even though I love like specifically where I grew up, like the actual like land where I grew up, but it's really, really snowy there and really,
Yeah.
really gray. So even if it's not snowy, it's like a gray color
Right.
for
And
like
that's it.
months
Yeah.
on end.
Yes. You're like, where
Yeah.
is the sun?
Yeah. And then
Yeah,
you and then if you fly out of there, you fly above the
yeah.
gray, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden it's like, like, oh
Sun.
my God, it's been here the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy because like my husband's from Hawaii, I'm from Arizona, and then we're out here and we're both just like, what? Like sometimes we're like, what are we doing? But
What are
it's,
you
it's
doing?
nice.
What are you guys doing? Well, I know this is not a podcast about you guys, but
Oh,
also
it's okay.
like,
Yeah.
are you there for work? Is that why you're there?
So my husband's a flight attendant. He works for Delta, and so after he got hired before the pandemic, and then once, but like they had everything kind of on pause, and then once things started to pick back up, they like pretty much gave them a month. They're like, okay, you have to like be in Atlanta for training, and then there's no hub in Phoenix, and so they gave him a few options for cities, and Boston was just like, we're like, okay, let's go to Boston, let's do it. So
Yeah.
that's how we ended up out here.
Side note, my best friend is a flight attendant for Delta.
Oh, really? Oh,
She
nice.
loves it.
Yeah, he liked it, and the flight benefits are I love it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us how, I mean, you said you were an ICU nurse. So how does someone go from being an ICU nurse? Like, how did you get into the hospice space? Was it like were you burnt out, or did you just kind of like have some interest in it and start exploring that? Like, kind of explain to us.
So initially, when I like first finished nursing school, I was a very gung ho. Like I'm gonna be like in my mind, like the best nurses were like ICU nurses or ER nurses, which is not true, but that's where my head was,
Right.
right? So
Right.
I literally Googled like #1 hospital in the country, and it was in Baltimore, Maryland.
Hmm.
So I like packed up my stuff. I got an ICU job there, and then as I became an ICU nurse, I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but it's like I learned like the second I actually started nursing, I was kind of like, oh shit. Like it was just like, this is gonna be so hard. This is
Yeah.
so hard. I did not realize what I was okay that I got into it, but I was just like, wow. And it took me
Right.
like 2 years to even feel like I like found my footing as an
Hmm.
ICU nurse. And then after that is when I started being like, oof, like I like what we're doing here. We're doing some good things. And I just saw this huge discrepancy of like trying to, of like keeping people alive at all costs and how much we cause suffering because of that and how we
Right.
were truly lacking conversations about end of life in the ICU setting. And when we did finally have it, I felt like it was like months too late.
Right.
And, you know, in my book, like my first chapter in my book is about like a particular patient that I advocated for basically to die, which was
Yeah.
such a weird feeling for me as an ICU
Yeah.
nurse. But like that was the first time like it felt like my voice mattered. It felt like I made a difference. It felt like they did decide to turn off machines because of what I said, which was empowering and like horrific the first time I
Right.
did it because it was like
It's
beginning of my
uncomfortable.
shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, beginning of my shift, this man who I truly cared about was like alive because of what we were doing, and by the end of my shift, he wasn't because of like all the things that I said
Right.
in a professional way. I didn't
Of
like flip
course.
out and say something weird, but
Of course.
professionally, we just had a meeting, and like then once the family heard the truth, they were like, "Oh, we want to turn off the machines," and he was
Right.
dead by the end of my shift. So it was
Wow.
like a profound experience of like I can advocate. My voice matters. Family, it's important. Families know what's going on, and it was like sad, and like I felt like I killed someone.
Right.
Um, but that was the start of like if people are going to die, which we all are, and there are definitely certain diseases that you know you're going to die from.
Right.
There should be a better way. Like
Right.
I don't think this is the way.
I
So
think
that's
like
why.
honesty and transparency is like kind of like what you're saying. And literally I have like I literally have your book sitting here. Like the thing that I had wrote on the front of it was like a sticky note that says like the power of choice, because it's just like
Yeah,
that's what it is. And that's kind of like what, from you telling me that story, is like you gave them just the facts of what was going on, and then you gave, you know, that, and that from that point it's in their hands to have that power to choose what's best for their loved one, or for, you know, the patient, if they're at a place where they can also choose. I think
yeah,
that's just like the most powerful thing that you can give somebody. And I totally relate. So I've done most of my nursing. I've been a nurse for about 6 years in the ER, but I did like a 6 month stint in an ICU. And I seriously, I was like, I can't do this. And it wasn't only just because of that, but I was like, I'm not, like in the ER, you know, that it's like so acute, you're getting them stabilized and sending them on their way. But like when you're in the ICU and you're actually seeing how long people are on these machines, and you know what's going on, but the conversation aren't being had, like it's taxing. So I can only imagine like you doing that for years and years and seeing that, how difficult that must have been.
yeah, yeah. I had complete nurse burnout. I thought like by the end of my ICU like nursing career, it was like I made the wrong choice. I'm not meant to be a nurse. I hate nursing. Like this is not who I. It was like I didn't ever think like maybe just try something else. I was just sort
Right.
of like this is wrong. I
Yeah.
fucking hate it.
Yeah.
Pardon my
Yeah.
French. I was just like
No,
I
please.
hate this, you know.
Yeah.
And then thankfully I started moving around and doing different things and like making nursing work for me, which this is a whole other podcast, but nurses out there, you can do a bunch of stuff to make nursing work for you.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know?
Preach it. Yes. It's so
Yes, like you
true.
gotta like don't stay in the same place if you hate it. What for whatever reason, management or you don't like the area, you know, move around.
Just
So
leave.
thankfully I did. And then
Yeah.
once I started hospice nursing, oh, I
It's
mean, my
changed,
life
huh? Game
changed.
changer.
It
Yeah.
yeah, it was a game changer. It
And
was
that
a
was
game changer.
8 years into your career?
Yeah, that was 8 years.
Okay. And so so that experience was obviously very profound for you. So did you just start like thinking like, how can I help in this different way? Or did that just kind of like stick in the back of your head as you kept going through, and then you just like started applying for hospice jobs? Like, how did you get specifically into hospice?
Yeah, I mean, there's like other things that, I did like agency work. I was like moving around. I was doing traveling nursing, like things like that. And ICU is what I knew. So I just sort of stayed there. But
Sure.
as time went on, and as I would advocate more and more for like honest conversations with families and patients and seeing how profound and meaningful that was, it was sad. Like I said, like that first time around is a little shocking. But after that, it was like, oh, wow, I feel like I'm really helping people, even if the end result is them dying. It
Right.
still felt like I was really helping. So then I just started applying for hospice jobs. And I remember specifically all the hospice jobs said you must have hospice experience. And I
Well,
just
how do I get
applied
that?
anyway. I was just applying
Yeah.
anyway. And basically went to the interview being like, listen, I'm an ICU nurse. I'm like dying. I want to do something else.
Right.
Please give me a chance. And they did. They did. And
Yeah.
then it's like a whole new ball game because it's like it's just so different.
Right.
I
And when
didn't
you're getting
realize.
a whole new set of skills, and even just like a big part of like your book that I've loved is just the communication factor between like, you know, nurse and patient and family, because I think that's a part that's like almost one of the most daunting for me personally as like a nurse, is like, what do you say like in these moments? And like every family is also very different. There's cultural
Yeah.
barriers, like there's just so many things, and it's always like, like, what do you say? And I think a big mistake that a lot of people make is like, from what I gathered kind of from like what your little chart of things to say versus not to say, is like people are like so quick to just, they want to make you feel better, right? Instead
Yeah.
of just like allowing the grief to happen. That's kind of like what I gathered is like, as humans, we just naturally, like, it's uncomfortable for us, and so we want to just like say what we can to make it seem like it's, oh, it's not a big deal, they're in a better place, like all these things. So
Yes.
that part was really honestly like very helpful for me.
Thank you. Yeah. I've been thinking
Yeah.
about making videos about like literally line by line, like here's what you can say. Cause I know
Yeah.
I needed that. Like
Yeah.
I always tell people like half the stuff that I like regurgitate every single day, like how I talk about end of life came from this amazing doctor, Dr. Cartmel, that I worked with when I first started hospice nursing. They would have me follow her a lot, and how she spoke to patients. I just put it in my brain and was like,
Right.
this is amazing. She knows like how to speak to people. And I
Right.
just like use what she says.
Yeah.
And
Work.
a lot of times we like need that. We kind of need like
Little script.
yeah, a little script. And then it gets easier and easier. And as time goes on, and as you really start seeing and learning how the body works, it gets easier and easier too, because I'm not just saying the stuff to say it. It's like I'm saying the things I say about end of life and death and dying, and the body knows how to die because of what I've seen.
Right.
Because of what I've seen. So that first year of hospice nursing was mind blowing because I was so used to seeing people die in a hospital setting
Hmm.
after being on machines and pumped full of medications and
Right.
fluids. And none of that is wrong, right? But it does
Sure.
create a certain type of death when
Right.
you're taken off the machines. And it's not painful or anything. They just look different. It's just different, right? But then to
Right.
see it time after time on hospice that first year, it looks different. The body does so many amazing things. Like I was like blown away. So it took a good year for me to even,
Like adjust to that.
yeah, adjust to that, and then to know how to speak to it, right? And then be truly amazed by it. That like over time you learn how to say things because of what you witnessed.
Right. Are you saying like it's like different in the sense of like seeing somebody be able to kind of like, I don't know, like quote unquote like naturally go through the dying process versus
Yes.
us just like intervening and then it being like a totally different process?
Yes, us intervening and then eventually going, never mind, and then
Uh,
stopping the intervention, and then
yeah.
the body dies,
Right.
is different than a body slowly, naturally going through the dying process. And people think that would be like long and suffering, and it's not.
Yeah.
Now, diseases you're dying from can be suffering, and you can have pain and like things
Sure.
like that, which we have to manage. But the actual dying process of allowing the body to naturally do its thing is truly amazing from a nursing perspective, like a science and biology
Yeah.
and chemistry. You're like, oh my God, like all the, like we're not doing anything and the body is like helping itself die.
Right.
It's wild
Wait,
to watch.
it is wild, and I can see what you're saying, like going from like a hospital setting and then seeing that like in somebody's home and just like a totally different setting. That's got to be very almost like jarring to be like, oh, like this is actually how people can die.
Yeah.
And I kind of just wanted to like go back to like what you were saying about um like getting into critical care and how like to be like a quote unquote real nurse, like you have to work in the ER and ICU. And I think a lot of us, and I've felt this before myself, as I've gone through these different moments of burnout, is like we tie as nurses, I think we tie a lot of our identity to that ICU or ER nurse. And my question for you was it hard for you to like kind of let that go? Like when you were like, people were to talk to you about like, if you're like, oh yeah, I'm a nurse, and they're like, oh, like what kind of nurse? Like did you have to like gather yourself to be like, oh, I'm a hospice nurse versus, because when you tell, like when I tell somebody like, oh, I work in the ER, it's like, oh my God, like that's, it's like, so it's almost like glorified versus like if you tell somebody, oh, I work in hospice, like I can't imagine like they're not like as excited as if you're telling them you work in the ICU. So how is that transition?
I totally get it. And that is why I stayed in ICU nursing, which was killing my soul, literally.
Yeah.
For 8 years, because it was so I was so identified into like being a badass. Like
Yeah.
this is who I am. I'm an ICU
Right.
nurse at Johns Hopkins. Like, do you know it's the number one hospital in the country? Just in case it is. Like
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I was so but eventually like it was easy to move on because I was so miserable.
Yeah.
And not everyone is so miserable in the ICU, hence why
That's true.
you stay there, right? But
Exactly.
I was so miserable. So eventually it took 8 years. Like I stayed in something that was literally killing me. I mean, I'm a sober alcoholic, but like talk about drinking.
Right.
Holy shit. Like, like I was
Right.
just leaving work. I mean, it was a fun party scene too, but I drank so much during that
It's
time.
so common. So
Yeah. Like I would get off at 6 a.m. and like drink at 6 a.m. until I would like pass out.
Right.
Just like, and
Right.
it wasn't like I was drinking because I wasn't truly thinking, oh, because this is so hard. But I
It
think
was
a little
just your
bit was.
way.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just my way of like I needed something to like help me relax,
Right.
like
I
so
totally
much.
get that.
Yes.
Like I think like I'm saying like so many nurses go through that because it's like your brain is like literally on for like 12 hours straight, and it's very stressful, high intensity, working in the ICU, in the ER, like even all these other specialties. And I trust me, I've been in those times in my life where like I would get home and it was like before I know it, I'm like, wow, well, every night I come home, I'm downing like a half a bottle of wine, or I'm having like
Mhm.
multiple shots of whiskey. Like we all get in those,
Yeah.
those cycles. And so I think that, I've seen that on your social media, how you're very transparent about your journey through like going through sobriety and dealing with the, alcoholism and high functioning. And I think that's very important to highlight because I think a lot of people out there suffer silently,
Yeah.
and that's the power of social media, is just like putting that out there so people are like, oh, I'm not alone, like I'm not broken, I'm not crazy, just because like
Yeah.
this is how I'm coping with this, because we all have those coping mechanisms.
We all do. Yes. And to answer your question, um it was hard, but hence why I waited so long to make that transition.
Yeah.
And then eventually it was like I was so miserable. I felt like there was no other choice except for to try something else.
Yeah.
And I still, I know I've lost skills. Like I've
Mhm.
gained other skills that I think are amazing too. But when it's from like my nursing school self would be like, oh my gosh, because
Like
I
what
really
did
have.
I
If I went to an ICU again today, I mean, I'm sure I'd catch on in a month or so, but like that first month, I would be
be
like,
like, whoa. Yeah.
whoa, I do not know this
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think that's to touch on that. I think that that's a big thing, that because you said the words like losing skills, and I've seen different people kind of talk about this. Is like, and I think a good way to frame it for people is like, you're not losing the skills. It's just, yes, like what you're saying, that you may be rusty, like you may be going there and be like, oh my God, I couldn't handle this right this minute, but like those skills are there. And if you ever needed to or wanted to like relearn those, it's not like you'd be starting from square one. Like
right.
you have the base, like you would be able to pick it up. And like they do go quick. Like even now, like I'm working just per diem in the ER, doing like a couple other things, and like when I go back for my little 4-hour shift, like sometimes I'm like, wow, like I'm kind of already like a little bit removed from this, and it's only been a few months since I've been doing per diem, and it is amazing how fast it goes.
I know. It is
But
amazing too how amazing per diem is.
oh my
Am I
God,
not? I try to
the
tell people
best
all the
life.
time,
Yeah.
do per diem, even if you do per diem full time. Like for
Yeah.
years before Hospice Nurse Julie, I was a hospice nurse per diem full time. So like I worked almost 40 hours a week. But you're like not involved in like the bullshit of the unit, you know, and you don't have to do all the extra annoying stuff because you're per diem. You can come and go as you please. You make your own schedule month to month. I mean, every hospital is different, but like
it's amazing.
It's worth it.
I love it.
Worth it. I love it.
And especially like working in the ER, it's a little bit even more flexible because we don't have to be there for the full shift. Like I said, like, because, you know, we come in at all different times. So like literally yesterday I went in 8 to noon. I'm off today. I'm going to go back in tomorrow, 8 to noon. Again, I have other jobs. It's not like I'm only working 4 hours, but like, it's amazing. I am definitely an advocate for per diem.
Yeah. Making nursing work for you because guess what? Hospitals don't care about you. Administration doesn't care about you. So this is an amazing profession where you can do what you want and make it work for you. And I think people get stuck in this, like, we need insurance. We need this. And I get it. Like I have children. I have a family. I'm telling you, just try it. Just try it. I know it's scary, but try it. We are nurses. We are needed everywhere and always.
Yep.
So if you're at a place that doesn't seem to respect their nurses, go somewhere else.
Right.
Go somewhere else.
Right. That literally is the beauty of doing this is like there's always going to be a job and like what you're saying is like I did a podcast with nurse.org and talked about this. Like it's your license. Like take control of it and stop feeling like you like these hospitals and these systems are the ones that are like controlling you, because at the end of the day, like you choose where you're going to go, you choose what department you're going to work in. And I think a lot of it's just fear-based, and I get it. Like it can be very scary. And what you're saying, like if you have a family and people depending on you, like just that level of uncertainty can be a little bit scary. But I also encourage people to just try it,
try it because you're going to be okay. And guess what? If it doesn't work out, you can go back to that full-time job.
Right. It's always
they're always needed, you know, they're always needed. Yeah. So there's different things you can do in nursing to like make your life work. And again, I know it's a little different because I don't have children in a family. So I do see how it would be less fearful, but I've made tons of money. People are always like, yeah, but the money. And I'm like, I've made so much more money working. Working as a per diem nurse, paying for my own insurance, planning my own retirement. And work-life balance is like, mwah.
Yeah. There's so many options. I love that you touched on that. I want to dive into the book because this is like the main reason that I wanted you on, because I think it's so cool. Like that, especially just like being a nurse, and not just a nurse, but being a nurse is, you know, like you're out there, you're doing your thing. First, take us to, I've kind of heard these stories through your social media, but talk to us about how did you even start on social media? When did you start on social media, and how did you like get things going and then have that moment of like, oh, like I can actually like do something with this?
Yeah. So I really had no plan. I feel like what happened to me feels like very either lucky or like meant to be happening, because I didn't really try. I had like no plan. I had a friend his dad was dying on hospice. And I was talking to him a lot about what I knew. And he was a good friend that I was with all the time. And then he was so surprised, like how much I knew and things that I would just like rattle off. And he'd be like, why have I not known that you like know this stuff? And you should tell other people. Like people need to know these things. Like I have never heard this before. Like you should do something with this. So initially, I was going to do a podcast, and he even bought me a microphone, being like, you need to do something, like try to do it. So I found out that was pretty difficult. At least it felt difficult for me, for my type of personality. And so I didn't really start on it. And then I went home to see my nieces. I hadn't seen them in a long time because it was a whole COVID era, right? So it'd been, I don't know, a couple of years. Went home to see my nieces. They were tweens. They were on TikTok and talking all about TikTok and doing dances on TikTok. And I was like joking with them and like making fun of them because all they wanted to do was like sit around and do these weird dances on TikTok. So I started doing the dances with them because I was home. And then I got on TikTok to watch their videos. And then I was like scrolling. Once you start TikTok, I mean, you know, it's like kind of addicting, right? So I'm like scrolling through, like instantly addicted to TikTok. And I found people my age. I'm 40, or I was maybe 39 then, but whatever, like older. And I saw people my age, like doing things about like gardening and like talking about space. And I was like, this is amazing. I love this thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do a
Yeah.
podcast. I'm going to make videos and posts about death and dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I really did. I probably made 5 videos, or maybe I don't even know if I made them right away. I just know I just like turned, my lighting's bad. Like I had no planning. I just like turned on my phone and was just like, bada, 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 upload, bada, 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 upload. And like 4 days in, one of the really bad videos, I think, went viral. And then they like kept going viral. I think overnight I had 10,000 followers, and like within like a few weeks I had 100,000 followers. And then, and then TikTok, I don't know how TikTok is now, but TikTok then seemed like it was almost easy. Like it just like happened.
You just post and they just come. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I'm different than a lot of people. I think a lot of people like really plan it out and try, and like, and I did not do that. So then
what year was this?
I think 21. So 2021.
It's been a few
years.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, 3 years.
Yeah. During
and then it took like a year, and then I had like 1 million followers, and like certain little things happened where like someone with a lot, like millions of followers, reposted one of my videos on Instagram. So then like overnight I had 20,000 followers on Instagram. Like, so I started like building all of the platforms through random circumstances. Like I had one article written I remember it was November in 2021 or 2022, where that article for some reason went like worldwide viral.
Wow,
and
so cool.
Because of that article, I got like hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram, on Facebook, more on TikTok, on YouTube. And then I got a book deal, like because of that one article.
Wow.
Right. So like
little
things like that just kept happening.
Like this article that you wrote, or was it like a article that was like about you?
It was about me. Newsweek wrote it without asking.
Oh.
And I remember waking up early in the morning and like checking my email, and someone from Newsweek was like, "Hey, we're printing an article about you. Do you want to comment?" And I was like, "Yeah." And by the time I said yeah and like wanted to comment, it was already out. Okay. And it went viral.
Interesting.
Because of course it was like kind of clickbaity. I mean, it was still Newsweek, but it was definitely like hospice nurse claims she knows what people say, some kind of crazy shit. You're like, what? Like, did I claim that? Like, I don't know. I can't remember what it was about, but I think it was like about
hospice nurse talking to the death.
Yeah. And it's always like a picture of me being like,
yeah.
like, oh God. Now it's gotten worse and worse with like articles like that. But the first one was pretty amazing, and it really changed my life. I mean, I got a bunch of things because of that article. So it just slowly took off like that. I had no real plan. I was still working full-time per diem. And then slowly it morphed into what it is today. And now it's like mostly what I do for work, but I still do work per diem just because I love where I work, and I do like being a hospice nurse. And I don't know how you feel, but I feel like way too afraid to like fully let it go. Like I can't.
Yes,
like,
that is scary. That is scary to just like totally let go, because then I don't even know like how to put that into words, because it's I feel that, and I've literally said those things like to my husband, like I don't know if like I can like fully pull out of this, but I mean I have a couple jobs in the nursing world, but like as far as like bedside is just the one. Yes, it's very scary to just like pull it all away.
I know.
But that's cool how you like started this. I think that's probably why your platform has been so successful, because what you're saying, if you started this not with like it doesn't sound like you were like trying too hard to like be something that you're not. Like you were just on the phone just like talking, like. And so then I think where people get kind of caught up in social media, where it can fail really easily, is when they are trying to get the followers, they're trying to do all these things, so then you're doing things that aren't really like authentic to you. So then like if you're gaining an audience, then like you're like, why is this not getting enough traction? And it's like, well, you probably weren't being true to yourself. So then now what you're doing is not aligning with like why they followed you, if that kind of makes sense. So for you, if you're just like talking to your phone, giving some information, then you just like got all these followers, like that's why they were there. So then the more you could just talk to it and be yourself, then that makes total sense to me as to why yours has been so successful. And that I love how like just this one article that was released like without even your permission was just like,
Yeah.
what launched you into the stratosphere with all these other like things like that. That's amazing. I think that just shows like the power of like just like trying new things in social media.
Yeah.
And like, like if you have this dream or want or whatever it is, like if you just try, like you never know what could come of it, right?
Yeah. I always say, like, I think when people ask, like, how do you do the social media thing? Or like they want me to tell them the secret. And I'm always like, I definitely don't have a secret. There's no curation here. Even now,
Right.
3 years into it, I still don't really plan
Yeah.
anything. But the one thing I think is important is, like, if you have something to say, then say it. Like, I
Just
think
say it.
that's all people, that's all my videos are. Like, I never, except for my YouTube videos, that's a whole like production thing. I do
Yeah.
do some preparation for that. But other than that, any other video I'm doing, I just like turn my camera on because I feel
In
like
the
I
moment
want
to
to
say it.
say something.
Yeah.
And then I say it, and that's it.
And then you post it. Yeah.
Then I post it.
Yeah. Again,
So
I love that because you're simplifying it. Like you're showing that it doesn't have to be this like this huge drawn out process of like you're having to like, do all these like skits and all these things just to get the followers. Like you can just get on and just like talk about something that you're passionate about, you're knowledgeable about, and that, it sounds like your purpose is to help people and to give people knowledge and to understand that, like death and dying doesn't have to be this like scary thing, and that if the more education and tools you have about it, the less scary that I feel it will be. And I think I also like kind of like stumbled upon your work kind of in this like interesting part of my life where like I just have like been like obsessed with this idea of like death and dying. And um I've like kind of like been writing like my own book. Well, I have like a draft done of like a book that was like kind of tailored around that as well. And so it's so weird how like all these your stuff just like came into my life when I was like already, I don't know if it's because I was like focused on death and dying already. So when I saw your stuff, I was like, oh my God.
right, yeah.
But anyways, so talk to us about the book. How did so you said you got from this article, you got somebody, they offered you a book deal. So like, did you plan on writing the book at first, or was this like they offered it to you? So you're like, oh, I'll write a book.
Well, it was really a literary agent who like convinced me to write a book. Like, again, like I wasn't really planning on any. I'm a bad planner. I'm like not thinking ahead. I'm not good at like schoolwork. Writing a book sounds like schoolwork to me.
Yeah.
So when they initially said this, they were like, "We really think you have a book in you. Like, we'll help you figure it out." And I was like, "I don't know. But eventually, I did start seeing like not everyone wants to see stuff and read this material on social media. There are so many
Right.
people out there that aren't on social media, and a book would be really helpful. So they helped me see that. We took like 6 months to write a proposal for the book, and then they pitched it, and then I got a book deal. And beyond my wildest dreams, life changing. I could not believe it. And then it was like 2 years of actually writing the book.
Okay.
And yeah, it's been out since June.
The New
Um,
York Times bestseller. We have to
New York
say that
Times
because it's
bestseller.
amazing.
Like, what the hell is happening? Really, it does feel like,
So
what
cool.
the hell is happening? Um,
On Good Morning America, just all these things.
I
It's
know,
so cool. I love it.
it's makes me so happy that people. It seems like people are willing and ready to learn about death and dying and to try to understand it. Because like in my everyday life, I don't know about you. Well, no, in my everyday life, like when I was an ICU nurse, when someone said like, "Oh, what do you do?" and I'm like, "Oh, I'm a nurse," or "What kind of nurse?" ICU nurse. It was always like, "Cool, wow," and like they kind of want to talk about it. Now, as a hospice nurse, if I say I'm a hospice nurse, people are like, ugh. Like at a at a dinner party, it's like I shut it down. Like no one wants to talk to me about hospice nursing. They're
Yeah.
always just like, ugh, sad, or that
Yeah.
must be awful. So it's funny that like in my real life, that's the reaction I get. But then like on social media, it's clear that people are wanting this
Right.
because they're listening and following. And so I don't know if it's like easier because it's like a little removed.
Right. Like maybe they have like a little bit like they can like process it on their own, like what you're saying without having to like give you like a response or you to see their face or whatever.
Right.
But I think the thing with death is like again, what I said earlier, like there's cultural things, like so many different things, like factors that play into this. But I just think that it's just scary. People are afraid because it's
Yeah.
like, you have, when you think about death, you then realize, well, I'm going to die one day. So then it's like, I think it just really scares people. And like, if you've had family members who have died, I can see why people get so afraid of it, but I think it's so important to just like to be able to talk about it and to not be so afraid of it, and to just have that foundation of knowledge, because like if
Yes.
and when it happens, if whether it's you that gets this terminal illness or diagnosis, or it's a family member, like at some point in your life, like you're going to deal with it. So just to have that foundation, just to realize that it doesn't have to be so scary, I think is just like one of the best things. And like I said, I've gone through your book. I haven't, like I said, read it like cover to cover, but I've gone through chapters, and just things that I kind of want you to like talk about that I found interesting, or I think people would find interesting, is first of all, it's like the deathbed phenomenon. Talk to us about that. What is it, and
Yeah.
how have you seen it in your practice?
So it's my chapter 6. So I always say, just to preface, because we're talking about fear, like the book is called Nothing to Fear, right? But I always just say, and it's normal to fear. And the main reason why I even wanted to write the book is because I saw in my own practice, like just seeing people on hospice and families around the dying person, over the families and the patients that were willing to like learn and talk about what they were going through, even in a quote unquote negative way, meaning like, I'm angry, I don't want to die, I'm afraid. Even those things really helped their dying process. And it turned something that was really scary into something a little more sacred. Like there is moments where if you're not afraid or willing to be present with how uncomfortable everything is, not physically, but emotionally, it can really change your outlook on like what happened, right? The sadness will always
Right.
be there. But like if you were willing to understand what was happening, understand they're not suffering, still witness their death, it can be like a sacred, I can't think of a better word, but like a moment that like lives with you forever, and not necessarily in a bad way.
Right.
Right.
Like you're not
So
attaching like a negative meaning to it.
yeah. And if you
Yeah.
don't know, a lot of times it is negative, because it's like they were suffering, the way they were breathing, they looked different. No one was helping us. It was so traumatic. Right. And it's like,
Right.
it's only because they didn't know. They didn't
Right.
know. So it's so scary when you don't know.
Right.
But so I just wanted to say that. But the deathbed phenomenon, chapter 6, is my longest chapter, because as an ICU nurse, and I'm sure as an ER nurse, like the stuff that I write in chapter 6, I would not have believed. Like I can't believe it's coming from me, because I
Right.
am very like I was gonna say science-based, scientific. Like
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
one to be like into deathbed phenomena, or
Yeah.
I would be the one being like, it's probably the medication. It's probably, I would be
Yeah.
that person, right?
Yeah.
But because I've been a hospice nurse for so long, it's so you can't deny it when you're witnessing deathbed phenomena over and over again. And there's a few things that you see over and over again. Like 1 in 3 people who are dying will have the phenomena of terminal lucidity, which is called the rally or the surge, or like the nicknames, when someone's like getting very close to death and then suddenly has a burst of energy and has like a really good day and then dies shortly after. You just see it over and over
Just
again. It's like undeniable. I don't know what to tell you.
nothing, no reason to
Yeah.
explain. Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
reason to explain it, but it
Yeah.
does happen. There's probably theories, right? A release of like cortisol, or who knows? No one really has done research on it, but we know that
Right.
it happens enough that we have to educate families so they know what's going on.
Right.
And then the second one that I see, I mean, so often I can't count, is deathbed visions, or visioning, we call it, where people see dead relatives, dead pets, old neighbor, anyone that they cared and loved for that has already died, um, will come see them. And it's not like you think, Colton. It's not like you think. It's usually a few weeks before they die. They're usually very lucid. They're not like in a stupor. And I mean, every once in a while, people do say they see their mom or something like right before they die. But usually, like the majority of people that I've witnessed visioning, they're like me and you sitting here. They're not like close to
And what
death. They're not
and they
actively dying.
and they just like they can just like see something, like they voice it, like they're like, oh, I see like my dog Benny or something, like they just say that.
Yes. Some people just say it. Like sometimes if the family's really open, they'll be like, Dad's seeing mom, blah, 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 blah. Like they'll be really open about it.
Wow.
a lot of times, because they're kind of like, what the hell? They'll pull me aside and say, my parents came to me last night and they told me I'm leaving soon. Not yet, but I'm leaving soon. And I feel so much better. I don't know what's going on with me, but I think it's real, and I'll be like, yeah, it's okay. I mean, I don't know what's happening either, but it happens to so many people. And then I'll leave the room and then the family will pull me aside and be like, hey, we think something's happening. He said he saw his parents yesterday. Like, I think he needs medication. Well, and we would never medicate for that. I mean, if someone was, what you specifically know what, like, I know what ICU psychosis looks like, right? Or delirium looks like it's much, much different. It's not someone agitated. It's not someone not making sense, but then happening to say their loved one's name. It's not like that. It is like clear.
Right.
And
that's wild. Has that changed? Has that changed like your like spiritual like awareness or practice or anything like that? Like, or like what, like what your thoughts are even on it? Cause like, just, I feel like witnessing that a lot, like you have to like be like, okay, like what is actually going on here? Like that's insane.
It's insane. It's really insane. So I wouldn't say it's changed. The only thing it's changed is I would never think as an ICU nurse, I'd be sitting on a podcast being like, people dying are going to see their dead relatives. And it's something that really happens. Like so it's changed me in that sense. Like I've been humbled because it does feel like we talked about like our egos, right? It does feel a little like ego killing, me coming on social media and being like, yes, this happens. I don't know why, but it does. Because it does. There are people out there who are like, I no longer want to believe you as a medical professional because you're saying like woo-woo stuff.
Yeah.
And it sounds woo-woo. What I always try to say is like, I'm not saying.
I'm just telling you what.
Yes, I'm just telling you what I see. What I see.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying it means anything. I'm not saying we know why it happens. I'm not saying that it is them actually seeing dead relatives. I don't know what it is, but I know what it's not.
Right.
It's not delirium, because I know what delirium looks like. It's not terminal agitation. It's not medications. It's not lack of oxygen, because they don't have lack of oxygen. I know what all that looks like,
And if it's happening often enough, like it's obviously something. That's why it's called like a phenomenon. Like it's just not totally understood. Like it's happening. We don't know why, but I'm just giving you the information, and you do with it what you will.
What you will. And it's like kind of hard to not talk about it because that happens so much. Again, something I didn't expect either. And I feel like I've always been a seeker and like a believer in something. I don't know what. Even as a little girl, I've always been like that. So it hasn't really changed like what I think and feel. I think it's amazing and beautiful to watch. I mean, so many beautiful things have come from me getting to witness people dying. As crazy as that sounds. I mean, it's like
no, I think
that's beautiful things.
I think that's I can totally see that. And I read a book it was by Bronnie Ware. I think she's from Australia, New Zealand, like the top 5 regrets of the dying. And she have you ever heard of that book?
I have, yeah.
It's a great book. And I just think like those, like she also like just like goes through these things of just like people at the end of their life. Hers is more like regret based. Obviously, that's what the book's called. But I think that like people having these experiences at the end of their life where they're like seeing a loved one or, whatever it is that they're seeing, I think it's comforting to the family. It's comforting to the person. And I mean, as a person taking care of them, it also has to be comforting to see them in that state. And like, they're not suffering in that moment. Like I'm assuming it's mostly happy things that they're reporting, right? When they're having these experiences.
Yes. For me, it's always been happy. And I think, I mean, this is probably a hot take. I think if it's not happy or they're agitated or they're seeing something that scares them, I don't think that's visioning.
Okay.
I feel like that is something else going on. And a lot of that has to do with disease. Like a lot of people with dementia, sometimes Parkinson's disease, they'll see and have fearful things where they're kind of agitated. But some people would argue with me because I just don't believe that there's like people. Oh my God, I'm sorry, my dog.
That's okay.
Stay with me right now. You're so cute. I just don't believe. I mean, I don't believe in hell. I don't think people are going to hell. I've never witnessed that. So I don't think. I think visioning is only good. If it's not good, it's not visioning.
Yeah, I mean, that's also comforting in its own sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, thank you for sharing the deathbed phenomenon, because it's like I said, I went through that chapter and I was like, this is because I mean, in the ER, like we see death, but it's mostly traumatic death. Like it's not like we're taking
Right.
care of hospice patients usually in the ER. I mean, with the state of healthcare, like we do have people in the ER for way too long. So maybe it's a little bit
Yeah.
more common now, but um, I wanted to kind of touch on, I had kind of mentioned it earlier and I just want you to kind of talk about it, of like things to say versus not to say. Like what are some of the most common things that you hear people say that you're like, okay, let's like that you would recommend not saying? And like if someone, if someone had a friend who is dealing with the loss of a loved one and they're grieving, like what is something that you would recommend not saying to them? And like how's a way that they can change that to approach them to make it a little bit of a like better situation?
Yeah. So if they've already lost the person, or if the person's already died, I would always recommend just versus like saying anything, it's more about like showing up and being there. So, and if you're going to show up and be there, you can say, I mean, I still say, I'm so sorry. Like I know that's like the typical thing to say, I'm so sorry. I do still start out with that, but I don't follow it up with like, I'm so sorry. And I'm glad they were comfortable. At least they were comfortable, or at
Mhm.
least this, or at least that, or it'll get better soon. I think we just need to get more comfortable with being like wildly uncomfortable. It's wildly
Yeah.
uncomfortable to be with someone that when you don't know what to say. Like,
Right.
so just don't say anything.
Right.
Like,
Just your presence is
yeah,
is
just don't say anything. Or you can even be sometimes if I'm really comfortable with somebody, I will like concrete just be like, I don't know what to say. I just want to be here with you. I want to show up for you. What does that look like? Like, what would
mm,
be really comforting for you right now? I want to do that, and if they don't know, then it's like, okay, you just be there. Or I think doing like really concrete things that you don't think about, like emptying their dishwasher, or like taking their kids somewhere, or like picking them up from like school, doing laundry, like
like
kind
taking
of
that load off. Yeah. Yeah.
physically showing up, and physically being like probably the one person, because most people won't, that's like comfortable with being uncomfortable and just not allowing them to have feelings. So if they start crying, not being like, I don't even hand tissues. Like, I think they should just cry. Like,
Yeah.
let them cry.
Just
You don't need
let
to
them
like
rip.
dry your tears. Nope, just
Right.
cry.
Let them
So like,
flow.
yeah, let it
Yeah. Yeah.
flow.
Yeah.
Don't try to make them feel better. So like anything that we like, the cliche things of like, it'll get better soon. I know someone whose dad just died and they do this thing, like any kind of like
Right.
advice giving.
Right.
I'd say like the less you say, the better.
Better. Yeah.
Just show
Just
up.
just be there. Yeah.
Just be
That's
there. Yeah.
I'm glad you said. Literally, I had one of my like closest friends in Arizona. Her mother just passed away about a month ago, and I literally just all I did was just fly out there just to be with her. Like it's
Yeah.
not like I didn't have anything profound to say. Just showed up, went to the funeral, and just was there. And I feel like that's enough, right? That's like in these situations, like that's all you need is just like people, your people to be around you and just offer that support. And I think that's great. What you're saying is to just like even just like, what do you need from me? And if there's no answers, then yeah, just like doing those simple things that like and even if you can kind of put yourself there, like what would I need in this moment? Like
I know.
what would make me feel relieved if like somebody just helped me like get a meal for my kids this night, or just like those, those types of things. I think that's like super helpful.
I think it's helpful the like if you need like if someone wants an actual script, like the thing I always say, I think it's really great to be truthful. Like nothing is better than the truth. And if you're being truthful, they'll be truthful, right? So like,
Right.
I'm so sorry. I love you. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say, but I just want to be here with you. Like, are you
Right.
okay? Do you want to talk? If you don't want to talk, that's okay. We can sit here
Right.
and watch movies. We can sit here and I can get out of here. I can do just
Right.
something like
Just
that.
tell me. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Just like honesty. And
Yeah.
honesty is like, I don't know what to say, but I love you and I know this is
Yeah.
so hard.
Yeah.
And that's
That's
it.
helpful. Yeah, that
You
really
know?
is. That's helpful because like again, like we get in these situations and we're like, what do we do? Like it's so, I love how you said like just be uncomfortable, because like that's sometimes you just have to be like not everything is meant to be comfortable. I mean, it's
Yeah.
that's life, right?
Yeah.
I there's literally so much I could talk to you about your book all day long. Like there's so much good information in here. I
Oh,
really hope
thank
that
you.
people go out there and get this. Nothing to fear. it's amazing. I'm so glad that I got myself a copy, and I will go through more of it as well because there's so much more in there to unpack.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not even meant to. You don't even just so you know, you don't have to read it from cover to cover. I purposely was like, I'm not going to write a book that's going to be like a novel. I want it to be something that's useful and helpful for
It's like a
people
kind of like a
going through
reference. Like,
this. Yeah, like a reference. So you can like go back in the index. Like I also made them put an index in there so you can like look up words and
yeah,
find out where they are in the book. So
yeah.
if you want information about like pain management or just information about hospice or just information about a specific disease, you can just go look it up.
Amazing. Is there anything else about the book that you want to talk about, that you want to include, that maybe we didn't talk about, that you want everybody to know? Or
I don't think so. I
no?
think you did
Okay.
great. Yeah, this is good. And I think it, it's like whoever needs it will find it. That's been my
Yeah.
take on this whole thing. It's like, I don't want anyone, I just want whoever needs it will find it. And it's there now. And I'm happy it is for whoever needs it.
Are you like looking in every bookstore like to see if it's where
Yeah.
it is?
Yeah.
Are
I
you
really
signing
am.
it? I think I saw something where you're like, I don't know if I could sign this.
It's turned into like a joke now. Like my boyfriend and I just visited Santa Fe and New Mexico. Very
Did you go to was it like the Balloon Festival? Is that what was
yeah,
going
that's
on
in
there?
Albuquerque, but we
Oh
stayed in
yeah.
Santa Fe and then drove to Albuquerque.
So you
But
went. Did you get in a hot air balloon?
I did not. But I
Okay.
have before in my life.
Oh, you have. Okay.
Yeah, but not this time. And now it's a joke. We go to like local bookstores and I like creep around to find my book. And honestly, 9 times out of 10 it's not there, which is
Oh
like
yeah.
such a humbling experience.
Yeah.
Such a
You're like
humbling
you're like whatever. It's
experience.
on Amazon. It's on Amazon. You're
Yeah, I'm like, it's fine. I don't care. I don't care.
That's
I don't know.
I loved that this your trip you went on. Like I said, you were in Flagstaff. That's like Flagstaff is like such a special place for me. Like
That's where you went to school, right?
I did. I grew up like 2 hours east of Flagstaff, and so I went to college at Northern Arizona University, and I loved it. I had like the literally the best 4 years of my life. It was so much fun. It's such a nice area. Like I'm so glad you got to experience. Was that your first time there?
Yes, and I was into it too. The first time we went there, the one thing that surprised me because we basically stayed like because we drove from LA, so it was like our first stopping point, and then Flagstaff to Santa Fe. But the first time we went, it was like packed. It was like
Yeah,
crowded, 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 and I was kind of surprised by
it
how
gets that
crowded it
way.
was.
Mhm.
And like I said, I'm like I've been trying to like get away because I
Yeah,
feel like LA is so crowded.
yeah.
I was kind of like, what the hell? But then on the way back, it wasn't as crowded.
Oh,
And
okay.
it was amazing. And I love that it's like not really that hot, right? I mean, I'm sure it gets
No,
hot, but because it's up the elevation and
it's like yeah, like summers are like 90s.
great.
That's like high. Like it's like 80s high, like really high is 90s. But like this time of year, because yeah, it's fall. Like it gets packed because everybody from Phoenix is going down or up to Flagstaff because they want to see all the leaves changing. I don't
Oh.
I don't know if you went up to like the San Francisco peaks. Like there are like all the aspen trees are up there where like all the fall foliage. So everybody comes up. And plus, I mean, Flagstaff it is busy a lot just because the university, and even during like the summer, everybody wants to escape Phoenix and go up north. And so
Yes.
it is a very packed place for how small it is.
Would you ever live there though?
Would I ever move there?
Yeah.
No, I think it's a good place for me to just go to visit. I
Yeah.
like I said, I love going back, but I don't know. And never say never. My
Never
my
say
husband
never.
and
That's
I
right.
my husband and I talk about like our later in life retirement will probably be Hawaii, because again that's where he's
Yeah.
from. So I think that's where we'll like end up eventually.
That's
For
amazing.
now, yeah, for now I'm like in the city having access to things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
good.
So Julie, so like just how I kind of round up every podcast. The podcast is called Mile 17. This was inspired by me. I ran the Boston Marathon a couple of years ago. Mile 17 was like a very significant moment for me. Like my family was there. Well, my sister, her boyfriend, and my husband. And as soon as I had like left them, realized I still had like 9 miles. I didn't train well for this marathon. I was struggling. And so at that point, like I just realized I could like just stop, be done, call it quits, or I could just like dig deep, keep going and like finish the marathon because that's like what I set out to do. And so I use that as like a metaphor for life. Like we all have these mile 17 moments. It could be a decade, a year, a day, a week, whatever. Is there just a moment in your life you can share with us that was like your mile 17 moment where like you like got to like you got through something that was just like so difficult, and once you got to the other side, you're like so proud of yourself and just like so glad that you stuck with whatever that was.
Oh my gosh. First off, Colton, I love that. I love
Thanks.
that. I love that. I love that. I think I've had many mile
Yeah.
17s, but the one that always stands out the most is my sobriety. I'm
Oh,
so
that's
proud
amazing.
of my sobriety, and it's like the greatest, greatest, greatest gift. I could do a whole other social media page just about sobriety, and it was so hard. And I really had a mile 17 moment. I think I've talked about this in videos, but my mile 17 moment in sobriety was when I was sober. So I was sober. I hadn't used drugs or alcohol for 11 months on my own. I didn't think I was like that bad because I wasn't like the typical person you'd view as someone with a drug and alcohol problem, right? I still had friends and family and a job and a car and all the things.
Right.
But I was so miserable and so sad. And I felt probably the closest to suicide I had ever. I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't have a plan or anything, but it felt like, oh, I'd rather die than be like this.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, I guess I'll drink again.
Yeah.
That's what I just need to do then. Like, why not drink if I'm going to be so miserable?
Right.
And instead of doing that, I got help. It was like either drink again or die, is what it felt like. Whether that was real
Yeah.
or not, it felt like
Yeah.
that,
Sure.
or get help. And I chose help, thank God. And
Yeah.
it really, really, I mean, truly has changed my life.
Yeah.
Completely has changed my life. And I can like weep right now talking about it
Yeah.
because I'm so
Yeah.
grateful
Yeah.
for
I
that.
can see it. I can see it on your face. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
yeah.
that's my mile 17.
Oh my gosh. I love that so
Yeah.
much. That and that that's such a great answer. I mean, everybody that gives these answers, it's always amazing because it's your personal journey. And I think that especially like we talked about in this profession, like it's it's common, and I don't think it's talked about enough, like how much nurses use alcohol, drugs, just anything to cope, because it's like almost like they have to at times just to make it to the next day.
Yeah.
And I love how you approach it too without shame or judgment, and just like understanding that like there is hope. If you're out there and you're struggling, you're listening to this and you are struggling with addiction, or you're thinking about like you're not having purpose in your life, like Julie's a perfect
Yes.
example that there's always hope. And if you're just willing, again, this all goes back to kind of being uncomfortable. If you're willing to just kind of explore those things, that there's always hope. And I mean, my family we have a ton of addiction in my family. And so your answer really, really hits home with me too. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate it. And for everybody out there listening, go get Julie's book, Nothing to Fear. It's amazing. It's a great, great reference. And if you have any questions about death and dying, make sure you follow Julie. It's Hospice Nurse Julie on
Yeah.
Instagram and TikTok, right? I didn't even realize
And YouTube, baby.
I follow you on
YouTube is my
Instagram.
favorite. Sorry.
YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube is
Oh,
my favorite because I
really?
can actually do like long form videos, but it's Hospice Nurse Julie across all boards either way.
Okay. Okay. Well, YouTube. I'm gonna go subscribe to your YouTube channel too.
Oh, thank you.
I didn't really. I've had you on Instagram. I think that's where I originally found you. Oh, it must have been, because literally today I was like looking through things and I was like, I don't even know if I've like seen her TikTok. Wasn't even following your TikTok, so I followed you on TikTok today.
Thank you.
And I definitely will check out your YouTube.
Yeah.
But thank you
Yeah.
so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of
It's been a
course.
blast. I want to come to Boston and be with you and your hubby.
Come to Boston.